Good morning and welcome to the Fruitful Forest Garden. We are situated in Scotland on the east coast, just across the River Forth from Edinburgh. And Scotland is normally known as being a very wet country. However, in the last few years we've noticed the climate changing quite dramatically and we've started to experience droughts, sometimes going 2 or 3 months without water. And so what we're going to do over the next few days is create a swale, and that's something we want to use to try and harvest as much water as we can and let it seep into the soil, and to save us doing a lot of watering, save lots of water and keep our forest garden well watered, well hydrated. So the first thing we need to do if we want to build a swale is to find out where the contours are on our site. And so just a bit of a reminder, if you look at a map and you see on the map there are these rings, and these are called contours, and what that means is everything that's along that line is all 200 metres above sea level, and then you go to the next one and that shows you where 200 metres is above sea level. And so that's what we mean by contours. So the contour is everything that's at the same height. And so this is a little map of our field here, our forest garden, and our field slopes down to the southeast. So this is north up at the top, and we know that this is roughly the shape of the land, but what we want to do is we want to create a swale coming across this way. And so what we need to do is we're going to start somewhere. We're going to start here, and we're going to use a bunyip, and that's going to allow us to mark out where the contour is, and that's where we're going to dig our swale. And I'll just explain what a swale is. So we're going to come over here. So if you imagine this is the slope of our ground coming down. And what happens at the moment, we have heavy clay soil, and the water, the rain just comes off and it just goes all the way down. We do have grass and we have some trees that hold it in to some extent, but as well as having these droughts, we're having torrential rain, and the rain just goes right over the top and also causes a bit of soil erosion. And so what we want to do is create a swale. And so if you imagine that's the profile, so we've cut our land in half, we're looking at the profile. What we're going to do is we're going to make a big trench. So we're going to dig out a trench. So what was there we're going to take out, and what was in here we're going to put over on the other side and change the profile. And now when it rains, what will happen is the water is going to come down and it's going to fill in here. And so we're going to have a trench that comes along the contour of the line that's going to fill with water, and then gradually that water will seep down into the rest of the land instead of going right over the top of it. And then what we'll be doing after we've made our swale is we're going to be planting. We've got a lot of trees to plant, a lot of fruit trees to plant, and so we're going to be planting our fruit trees, and then our fruit trees can benefit from the rainwater that's coming in. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And so the tool that I mentioned earlier is called a bunyip. And we're going to make another video to show you how to use the bunyip. So while we look at this at profile, what that's going to look like on here is this is where we're going to have dug out our trench, our swale that goes along the contour, and our trees. We'll be planting our trees. And the downs, so the trees get planted on the downside of the swale. And we'll also, what we'll do is in between those, we'll have other vegetation. We'll have our currants and ground cover and things. So it'll be like a lane of forest garden, and that'll hold it all together. If we try to do a trench across here, this is actually on a slope that would be running downhill, and what we would find is that the water wouldn't actually sit in the trench and go through the soil. It would just all go down that way. The water would go down the slope. It wouldn't actually sit in the trench because water always goes to the lowest point. So good morning and welcome to the Fruitful Forest Garden. We're in Scotland on a dreary January morning. Scotland's quite famous for being wet. However, with climate change we're finding we're getting more and more droughts. And so what we want to do is create a swale along here on contour to try and capture as much rainwater as we can and let that seep into our burgeoning forest garden that goes down this way. And to do that we're going to use a bunyip. And so what I've got in my hands here is a bunyip. And what you can see, so bunyip is basically one long plastic tube. You see it goes down to the bottom, it's all spiraled out. That we attach at either end onto a meter stick. And so this piece of wood is this graduation's in here for a meter. And so both ends are on that meter stick. And when I hold them both together, and if they're at the same height, you should see so when I hold those at the same height, you see that the water level on both sticks is the same. And if you imagine a bunyip is like a bowl of water or a great big loch or lake, you know, when you tip, you can look at this bit here, when you tip a bowl of water or a cup of water, the water level always stays flat. So it might be higher up one side of the bowl than the other side of the bowl, but the water level is always going to be flat. Because water always finds its lowest level. You won't find water with lumps and bumps in it like you would a bowl of flour, but if it's a liquid it's always going to be flat. And so when I tip this backwards and forwards, you can see that it's acting like one body of water, where that's always flat. But if you look at the graduations on our meter sticks, you'll see that they're reading a different number. And that's because suddenly the ground's not level anymore. So for example, so when I hold them, like if I hold them together, if they're on a flat land, they're at the same height. If I start moving, if I keep one of these static and then move the other one uphill, you can see now so you can see that the level is flat, but when you look at the numbers on the meter stick, you can see what the difference in the height is. And if you zoom out, you'll be able to see the difference in height of the meter sticks, that I've moved one further up than the other. So the water's at the same level, but that's showing me that there's a 15 centimetre difference in height between these two stakes, these two meter sticks. And so how we use that to find the land, I'll bring these back. It's always a good idea when you're working with the bunyip to move it very slowly. And when you are walking around, is to cover the tips so that the water doesn't pour out the top. And the other really important thing is to not have any air bubbles in the water or in the tube, because that will affect how the water reacts. So what I'm going to do is, this is the height here that we know we want to have our swale. And so when I put those both together, I'm going to see what the height is. One slightly higher than the other here. There we go. So that, when they're both together, the height is 58 centimetres here. So what I'm going to do is Ewan, my cameraman here, he is going to hold this on here, and I'm going to start to move away. Now can you keep your finger on there so the water doesn't drop? I'm going to try and move this. Fine. When it gets to 58. So I'm at 58 again. Are you at 58 yet? Yeah. I can see. Now we've come to here, so we've used the length of the pipe. Ewan's going to have his hand over the plastic at the end. You're walking over to here. You're going to start here now. Okay. Okay, so you're going to be right up against that.
Okay, so the resident donkey's here to finish off digging our swale. What's a swale? Essentially, for me, it's a tree planting system, but it's also a ditch, a water infiltration ditch on contour. So this swale is basically all on the one level, so the water's all sitting there pretty level. So I think we've done a decent job of digging it. It's a hand dug swale, it's all been done by spade. And I've said it's a tree growing system as well, so the trees are going into the bank here at the back of the swale, and there'll be ground cover crops, and we'll probably put some green manure down to start with, so we've got a decent amount of coverage, because obviously weeds will start to move in pretty quickly. The idea behind the swale is the water sits there and then eventually infiltrates into the bank, and it makes its way down slope towards the rest of the land. Should we have them in Scotland? That's debatable, and a lot of permaculture folks have got their own ideas about it. This is the first one we've dug, and we've been on the land for almost 7 years, and it's really a bit of an experiment. We've had quite a lot of dry spells lasting 12 or 13 weeks, so we want to see if that's something that's going to be appropriate for us going forward. What we'll probably do as well to stop evaporation is we'll fill the base of the swale. Once we've broken it up a little bit, we'll fill it with wood chip, and then all that nutrient should get locked in and hopefully make its way downstream, help bring the trees on, and hopefully infiltrate the rest of the landscape with water. So I'm going to keep working on the swale. I'm going to put some compost in it now, some well-rotted compost, so it should be ready for growing hopefully by the rest of the day if I get my act together.
So you can see that now that Scott's finished digging the swale, we've been planting it up today with a variety of fruit trees. So what we've been trying to do is emulate what Stefan from the Permaculture Orchard does, and have an apple, a pear, and then a nitrogen fixer. Apple, pear, nitrogen fixer. At the moment we've just put the apples and pears and also plum trees in. We've mixed it up a bit, and then what we're going to do next is put in some nitrogen fixers, and that takes the nitrogen out of the air, and that's going to feed the trees so that we don't have to. Then after that we're going to put some more fruit and shrubs in the lower layers. Now you can see we've planted up the swale. We've included some nitrogen fixers like this elderberry, and we've got a lot of blackcurrants that we took from last year's cuttings. We've planted those in. We've also put a lot of strawberry plants along the south facing bank. That'll form a nice ground cover. As we go along, we've got some perennial vegetables, some perennial kale, some sea beet, some French sorrel. As we go along, you can see we've got some sea buckthorn, so these are nitrogen fixers. And we have some autumn olives for nitrogen fixing, and a little gorse. Here we've got some herbs, some rosemary, some Chinese mallow, some red currants, and at the far end we have josta berries, which are a cross between gooseberries and blackcurrants. And we've also put in some perennial alliums, such as the Welsh onion here, and we've put in some walking onions. And that's us finished for today.